He was TV's most promising star in the 1960s, with hit shows like Coronet Blue and NYPD, but Frank Converse shocked everyone when he walked away from fame at the height of his career. Now, decades later, the real story is finally coming out. The marriages that tore him apart, the roles that haunted him, and the dramatic decision that changed everything. This is what really happened to one of Hollywood's lost legends. Frank Converse was born on May 2, 1938, in St. Louis, Missouri, a city alive with culture and history. Growing up in a place known for its music, theater, and art meant he was surrounded by creativity from an early age. The Mississippi River gave St. Louis its energy, and its thriving arts scene made it a perfect backdrop for a young mind drawn to performance. The 1940s and 1950s were a golden time for the city. The St. Louis Symphony Orchestra and the Muni Opera brought world-class performances to local audiences, giving people access to music and theater on a grand scale. It was the kind of environment that could inspire a child to dream bigger. For Converse, it wasn't just about watching performances. It was about feeling something stir inside him, a pull toward storytelling and expression that would shape his future. Beyond the stage and concert halls, St. Louis was a place where values mattered. People took pride in hard work and community, and those principles stuck with Converse. His career, spanning decades, would reflect a quiet professionalism, a dedication to craft that felt deeply rooted in his Midwestern upbringing. He wasn't just a talented actor, he carried himself with integrity, something that set him apart in an industry often defined by egos and spectacle. Before Broadway, Converse built up his Shakespearean resume with roles in King Lear, Caesar and Cleopatra, Hamlet, The Comedy of Errors, Richard III, Henry V, and Much Ado About Nothing. These weren't just stepping stones, they were proof of his range, showing he could handle everything from tragedy to comedy. His Broadway debut came on February 26, 1966, in First One Asleep Whistle. It was a milestone in his career, even though the play lasted for just one performance. For any actor, stepping onto a Broadway stage for the first time is both thrilling and nerve-wracking. It is the kind of moment that stays with them forever. Although the production had a short run, the experience was invaluable. Broadway operates at a different level, demanding precision, stamina, and adaptability. Converse had to adjust quickly to the fast-paced environment, working alongside experienced professionals who had spent years perfecting their craft. This first taste of Broadway was just the beginning. Even with First One Asleep Whistle closing almost immediately, Converse didn't let the setback define his career. He kept pushing forward, gaining experience and proving himself in more roles. Every performance, no matter how brief, added to his understanding of the stage and the industry. His performances in The Seagull and Design for Living were particularly well received. While details of his involvement in The Seagull are less documented, his role in Design for Living is better known. He played Otto in Noel Coward's sophisticated comedy, which explores themes of love and artistic ambition. The play first premiered in 1933, but Converse joined its 1984 Broadway revival. His performance brought humor and charm to the character, earning praise from critics and audiences alike. Design for Living required an actor who could balance wit with emotional depth. Converse handled it with ease, proving his versatility. His ability to bring complexity to his characters made his portrayal memorable. This role, along with his appearances in other stage productions like The Philadelphia Story and A Streetcar Named Desire, solidified his place in the theater world. Beyond the stage, Converse also gained recognition in television. His work in The Bold Ones, The Lawyers, and The Edge of Night expanded his reach to a wider audience. These performances earned him nominations and critical praise, proving that his talent extended beyond Broadway. Frank Converse's career took a major turn when he landed the role of Michael Alden in Coronet Blue, a TV series that aired in the summer of 1967. At first glance, it seemed like just another short-lived show, but Coronet Blue became a phenomenon, capturing audiences with its gripping mystery and leaving behind a legacy that still sparks discussions today. The premise was simple but compelling. A man is pulled from a river with no memory of who he is or how he got there. The only thing he remembers is the phrase, "Coronet Blue." That mystery set the stage for a suspenseful journey, as Alden, played by Converse, tried to uncover his past while being pursued by a shadowy group known as the Graybeards. The show blended action, psychological drama, and a sense of existential search, themes that resonated with audiences in the rapidly changing social landscape of the 1960s. Converse's portrayal of Alden was one of the show's strongest elements. He brought a mix of vulnerability and quiet strength to the character, making him relatable despite the bizarre circumstances. Alden wasn't just a man searching for answers. He was discovering himself along the way. He had no memory, but as the series unfolded, he realized he could speak fluent Spanish and French. He had skills in martial arts. Each episode added another piece to the puzzle, both for Alden and for the viewers who were desperate for answers. What made Coronet Blue unique wasn't just its mystery, but the way it was presented. The show had actually been filmed in 1965, but CBS shelved it for 2 years. When it finally aired in 1967, it was released as a summer replacement series, a time slot usually reserved for reruns and failed pilots. Nobody expected much from it, but to everyone's surprise, Coronet Blue became the highest-rated show of the summer. Audiences were hooked. Despite its success, the show had a problem. It was never meant to be left unresolved. Coronet Blue was supposed to continue, eventually revealing that Alden had been part of a secret organization, possibly a Soviet spy ring, and had tried to defect before losing his memory. But the series ended before any of that could be explained. The mystery remained unsolved, and that ambiguity only made it more fascinating. For years, fans speculated about what Coronet Blue truly meant. The cryptic phrase itself became part of TV history, with viewers coming up with their own theories. That open-ended storytelling helped the show gain a cult following. Even though it lasted only 11 episodes, 2 of which never aired, people remembered it. Decades later, it was still being discussed, analyzed, and praised for its originality. For Converse, the role of Michael Alden was a turning point. It showcased his ability to handle complex, layered characters, paving the way for future roles in series like NYPD and Movin On. But no matter how many roles he played, Coronet Blue remained one of the most intriguing chapters of his career. Looking back, Coronet Blue was ahead of its time. Its mix of mystery, espionage, and personal discovery was something that later shows, like The Fugitive and The Prisoner, would explore in different ways. And while its abrupt ending left audiences frustrated, it also ensured that Coronet Blue would never truly fade away. The mystery, just like Michael Alden's lost past, would always remain. Next, the casting process for NYPD was all about finding actors who could bring depth and realism to their roles. Jack Warden, known for his commanding presence, played Lieutenant Mike Haynes, the experienced leader of the team. Robert Hooks, one of the first black actors to star in a major TV series, portrayed Detective Jeff Ward, adding an important layer of diversity and social awareness. Then there was Frank Converse, whose background in theater and television made him a perfect fit for Detective Johnny Corso. Together, these 3 actors created a dynamic that set NYPD apart from other police dramas of the time. The producers wanted more than just another crime show. They aimed for something both entertaining and socially relevant. By casting Converse, Warden, and Hooks, they built an ensemble that could handle complex storylines with authenticity. What made NYPD stand out was its willingness to tackle real-world issues, corruption, racial tensions, and the moral dilemmas of law enforcement. These weren't just surface-level themes. They were woven into the fabric of the show. Frank Converse's role as Detective Johnny Corso was central to the show's raw and unfiltered take on urban policing. NYPD aired during a turbulent time in American history, when crime rates were rising and social unrest was shaping the national conversation. Instead of filming on sound stages, the show used real locations in New York City. Storylines were inspired by actual police cases, making each episode feel more like a documentary than a scripted drama. Corso was part of a team of plainclothes detectives working the streets, solving crimes, and dealing with the unpredictable nature of the job. The half-hour format meant every episode had to be tight and focused. One particular storyline stood out: Corso being suspended after being accused of attempted rape. It was a bold move for television at the time, diving into the personal risks and vulnerabilities that police officers faced. The show didn't sugarcoat anything. It depicted the ethical gray areas of law enforcement, from officers struggling with their conscience to cases where justice wasn't as clear-cut as it seemed. Unlike other police dramas that leaned into formulaic storytelling, NYPD thrived on unpredictability. One week might show a case of police corruption, the next could focus on racial discrimination within the department. This approach gave the show a level of realism that audiences weren't used to seeing. Converse brought a unique energy to the role. He wasn't the loudest or most aggressive character on the team, but that was exactly what made him stand out. His reserved, introspective style balanced out Warden's authoritative presence and Hooks's charismatic energy. Their chemistry was key to making the show feel real. You had Warden as the hardened, by-the-book lieutenant, Hooks as the socially aware detective dealing with racial tensions in the force, and Converse as the quieter, more emotionally complex officer trying to navigate it all. Off-screen, the bond between the three actors helped shape their performances. They weren't just co-workers reciting lines, they built genuine working relationships. That connection translated on screen, making their partnership as detectives feel natural and believable. The inclusion of Robert Hooks was particularly groundbreaking. Having a black actor in a leading role on a major TV show wasn't common at the time. His presence wasn't just important for representation, it also allowed the show to address racial issues in a way that felt authentic rather than forced. But it was Converse's acting style that set him apart from other actors of the era. While many went for big, dramatic performances, he leaned into subtlety. He had a way of saying more with a glance or a shift in body language than with words. This likely came from his stage background, where actors learned to use their physical presence to convey emotion. On television, this restraint made him intriguing to watch. His characters often felt more real because he didn't overplay them. In NYPD, this approach worked perfectly. Corso wasn't a hothead or a hero. He was just a man doing a tough job in a complicated world. When he second-guessed himself after a shooting, the tension didn't come from an over-the-top performance. It came from the quiet moments where he wrestled with his emotions. That level of nuance was rare in police dramas at the time. Converse's reserved intensity made him stand out in an era where bigger often meant better. While some actors built careers on explosive performances, he made his mark through restraint. It was a different kind of power, one that drew audiences in, made them lean closer, and kept them invested in his characters. And in a show like NYPD, where realism was the goal, that made all the difference. Frank Converse brought something different to Movin On. As Will Chandler, he wasn't your typical trucker. He was young, educated, and thoughtful, a stark contrast to Claude Aiken's character, Sonny Pruitt. Sonny was the old-school veteran of the road, a man who had spent years behind the wheel, relying on instinct and experience. Will, on the other hand, approached life with a fresh perspective, shaped by his education and a desire to understand the world beyond the highway. This contrast wasn't just about personality, it was the core of what made the show compelling. Together, they roamed the country in their iconic green Kenworth W925, taking on hauling jobs that led them into the lives of everyday Americans. The stories weren't just about trucking. Each episode tackled deeper issues, economic struggles, redemption, and the importance of community. Sometimes, Sonny's gut instincts were enough to get them out of trouble. Other times, Will's problem-solving skills made the difference. Their dynamic wasn't just entertaining, it reflected the generational and cultural shifts happening in America at the time. What made Movin On stand out was its authenticity. It was filmed on location across the country. From the deserts of Arizona to the back roads of North Carolina, it captured the 1970s trucking culture in a way that felt real. The CB radio slang, the long-haul camaraderie, the struggles and triumphs of life on the road. Viewers connected with it because it wasn't just a show about truckers. It was a show about working-class America, told through the eyes of two men who saw the world in very different ways. The chemistry between Converse and Akins was a huge part of the show's success. Their characters were opposites, but they complemented each other perfectly. Sonny was tough, direct, and a bit rough around the edges. Will was more analytical, always looking for the smartest way out of a problem. They had different ways of dealing with life, and that often led to tension, humor, and moments of real connection. Interestingly, their off-screen personalities weren't all that different. Akins was known for being warm and outgoing, always chatting with the crew and engaging with fans. Converse was more reserved, preferring to keep to himself between takes. But this contrast only made their on-screen partnership feel even more real. Both actors even went the extra mile to make their roles convincing. They obtained chauffeurs' licenses and actually learned how to drive trucks, ensuring that their performances weren't just believable, but grounded in real experience. Movin On wasn't just another TV drama. It was part of a shift happening in the 1970s television, at a time when shows like All in the Family and N.Y.P.D were tackling social issues. Movin On did something different. It put a spotlight on blue-collar workers, a group often overlooked in mainstream media. It showed their struggles, their resilience, and their way of life. The timing couldn't have been better. The 1970s saw a surge in interest in trucking culture, thanks to the rise of CB radios and songs like Convoy. Movin On tapped into that, and its theme song, sung by country legend Merle Haggard, became a #1 hit in 1975. It was more than just a TV show. It was part of a cultural moment. Filmed in locations across the U.S., the series had the feel of a road trip, giving viewers a glimpse of America's vast landscapes and small-town life. It painted truckers as modern-day cowboys, living a life of freedom and adventure, always moving toward the next job, the next challenge, the next destination. Frank Converse had a way of bringing depth to every role he played, even in television movies that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. He wasn't just a familiar face. He was an actor who could take on complex characters and make them feel real. Some of his most memorable performances came from TV films that tackled difficult subjects or portrayed historical figures with nuance. One of his standout roles was in Marilyn, The Untold Story, where he played baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. The 1980 biopic followed Marilyn Monroe's rise to fame and her struggles behind the glamour, with Catherine Hicks in the lead role. Converse had the challenge of portraying DiMaggio, a man known for his reserved nature and deep love for Monroe. Their relationship was filled with both passion and tension, and even though his screen time was limited, Converse managed to capture the quiet intensity of a man who struggled with Monroe's fame and independence. Playing a real-life figure like DiMaggio wasn't easy. He was a national icon, but his personal life was far more complicated than the public ever saw. At the time of the film's release, DiMaggio was still alive, which meant the script avoided certain controversies, including rumors of domestic abuse. Instead, it focused on his devotion to Monroe and the emotional distance that grew between them. Converse played this dynamic with subtlety, letting his body language and expressions tell the story more than words. The film became the second highest-rated primetime program of the week, with Hicks receiving much of the praise, but Converse's performance added an important layer to Monroe's tragic story. 2 years earlier, in 1978, Converse took on a completely different role in Sergeant Matlovich versus the U.S. Air Force. The film was based on the true story of Leonard Matlovich, a decorated Air Force sergeant who made headlines when he came out as gay and was discharged from the military. It was a groundbreaking film, airing at a time when LGBTQ+ rights were rarely discussed in mainstream media. Converse played Captain Larson Jenneke, an officer caught between military protocol and personal morality. His character wasn't a villain, but he represented the system that Matlovich was fighting against. What made his performance compelling was the way he balanced authority with quiet conflict. Jenneke had a duty to uphold Air Force policies, yet he couldn't ignore Matlovich's service record or the injustice of the situation. Converse portrayed him as a man who was doing his job, but not entirely comfortable with what that job required. The film was praised for its thoughtful approach to discrimination in the military, long before the era of "don't ask, don't tell." Converse's role wasn't the flashiest, but it was a critical part of the story, showing how institutional prejudice didn't just affect those being targeted. It also forced others to grapple with their own values. In Dr. Cook's Garden, a 1971 television movie, Converse played Jimmy Tennyson, a young doctor returning to his hometown only to discover a disturbing secret. His mentor, Dr. Leonard Cook, played by Bing Crosby, was beloved in the community. The town seemed perfect: low crime, happy families, and an almost unnatural level of peace. But as Tennyson looked closer, he realized the truth. Dr. Cook had been quietly euthanizing people he deemed unworthy, deciding who lived and who died based on his own twisted sense of justice. The film, adapted from Ira Levin's play, was a psychological thriller wrapped in the charm of small-town America. Converse's character was the moral center of the story, torn between admiration for his mentor and horror at what he had uncovered. His performance captured the slow unraveling of trust, as Tennyson pieced together what was happening and struggled with the implications. The tension between him and Crosby's character built up to a powerful confrontation, where he had to decide whether to stop Dr. Cook or become complicit in his actions. Frank Converse's personal life has been shaped by 3 major marriages, each reflecting the challenges of balancing love and a demanding career. His first marriage to Carol Towser began in 1959, right as his acting career was taking off. Over the next 16 years, Converse became a recognizable face on television, starring in Coronet Blue and N.Y.P.D. But success often comes at a price. The pressure of a rising career and the unpredictable nature of the industry may have strained the relationship. By 1975, their marriage ended in divorce. They had 2 children together, marking this period as both a time of professional growth and personal change. Not long after, in 1976, Converse married Elise Astrid Ronning. This chapter of his life coincided with some of his most intense work in television and theater, including his role in The Philadelphia Story on Broadway. Despite their initial connection, the marriage lasted only 6 years, ending in 1982. While the reasons for their divorce remain private, the demands of a career in the spotlight often test relationships in ways that are hard to overcome. That same year, Converse found lasting love with Maureen Anderman, a talented stage actress and Tony nominee. They married in 1982, and this time the relationship endured. Their shared background in theater may have helped them navigate the highs and lows of the profession with mutual understanding. Over 4 decades later, they remained together, raising 2 children and building a life grounded in respect and shared passion. Converse has described this as his ultimate marriage, a reflection of the happiness and stability he found with Anderman. In the 1980s and 1990s, Converse made a strong return to Broadway, proving his versatility as a stage actor. In 1980, he starred opposite Blythe Danner in The Philadelphia Story, playing C.K. Dexter Haven, a role that required equal parts charm and wit. The revival was well received, and his chemistry with Danner was undeniable. 8 years later, The two reunited in A Streetcar Named Desire, where Converse took on the role of Harold Mitch Mitchell. Unlike his previous role, Mitch was a deeply conflicted and tragic character, torn between kindness and societal expectations. His performance added layers to a man often seen as merely naive, showing the depth Converse could bring to the stage. He didn't stop there. In the years between those two productions, he tackled Design for Living and Brothers, proving he was just as comfortable in sharp comedies as he was in heavy dramas. While many stage actors hesitate to enter the world of daytime television, Converse took on the challenge in the 1980s, stepping into the fast-paced world of soap operas. He played Harry O'Neill on One Life to Live from 1984 to 1985, portraying a middle-class father trying to navigate the struggles of family life. Later, he appeared on As the World Turns and All My Children, showing that he could bring authenticity to a format often criticized for melodrama. Soap operas required an intense workload. Tight production schedules and quick turnarounds meant little time for rehearsals. Many actors struggled with the demands, but Converse's theater background gave him the discipline to adapt. His performances stood out, proving that even in a genre often overlooked for its artistry, great acting could still shine. Beyond daytime television, Converse became a familiar face in some of the most popular shows of his time. He made multiple appearances on Law & Order, playing different characters across various episodes, including Admissions in 1999 and Tomorrow in 2002. Procedural dramas required a different kind of acting, self-contained performances that had to feel lived in despite limited screen time. Converse delivered, making each guest role memorable. He also appeared in Columbo, Murder, She Wrote, and The Equalizer, shifting between crime dramas, mysteries, and psychological thrillers with ease. Each role reinforced his ability to disappear into a character, no matter how small the part. Even as the entertainment industry changed, Converse never faded into the background. He stayed active, balancing high-profile projects with smaller, more intimate performances. In 2002, he returned to Broadway for Our Town, another classic that allowed him to showcase his stage presence. A decade later, he appeared on NYC 22, proving that even after years in the business, he was still ready to take on contemporary television. He didn't shy away from regional theater or independent films either, keeping his craft sharp by embracing a wide range of roles. His career wasn't about chasing fame, it was about acting as an art form, something he continuously explored through different mediums. Looking back, Frank Converse's career was defined by adaptability and longevity. He left a lasting impact on theater, where he brought depth to timeless works, like A Streetcar Named Desire and Our Town. On television, he became a recognizable presence, from his leading roles in Movin On to his ability to elevate guest appearances in crime dramas. His work in soap operas proved that even in the most demanding production environments, strong acting could make all the difference.